Angry guy here. And women have been left homeless and lonely as men abandon all women. Women have been left homeless and lonely as men abandon all women. Let's just go ahead and jump right into this article. Guys, so millennial women are facing the first decline in well being since the silent generation. Guys, this is over 100 years ago. So, as I've said, we're now going back to the 1800s, where essentially women they are declining so rapidly in modern day society. Their health, their well-being, their finances are in a place that women have not experienced since going back to roughly the 1800s, going back to the pre-WW2 era, pre-WW2 era. Things are not necessarily better for American women today than they were for their mothers and grandmothers, according to a new report. In recent years, the most important markers of women's safety and health have declined, the data showed. The Population Reference Bureau created an index of women's well being, identifying the factors that best indicated the general status of poverty, education, incarceration, political representation, physical and mental health, and participation in the labor force. The index was created to compare the status of different generations of U.S. women at the same stage of life around ages 25 to 34. While there have been some areas of generation to generation improvement, millennials are the first generation of women since the so-called silent generation who are seeing declines in overall well-being based on our index. So the lead author of the report, Sarah Syria Gilley. I butchered that. A research analyst at Population Reference Bureau, a nonprofit organization that collects population data on health and well-being. The silent generation was born between 1928 and 1945, living through the Great Depression and WW2. So it's been roughly 100 years. We're not talking about the greatest generation that came before the silent generation, but which was the WW1 era generation of people. We are talking about the people who are essentially the parents of the boomers, the doomers, the baby doomers. Affordable, but it's still roughly 100 years, 1928. So yeah, it's roughly 100 years, almost 100 years if you want to nitpick on it. But are 94. Affordable quality healthcare is particularly a problem in rural communities for women such as Tyler Azor, a 28-year-old mother of the Chippewa Nation, raising six children, three biological children, a stepchild, and her two sisters after the passing of their mother, and Havrai, Montana. Often doctors will come into town to pay off their student debt and then move on to a bigger city, she said, and mental health care is hard to find, right? And guys, indigenous women are really struggling here. Progress on decline. There was sharp progress in health, safety, education, and employment from the silent generation to baby boomer women. Progress slowed somewhat for Generation X compared with their mothers, but then things began to stall in 2017, she added. In this updated report, we saw that it's no longer stalled, but it's now actively in decline for millennials. The rate of deletion for millennial women increased compared with Generation X, according to the data, and the rates of self-deletion have nearly doubled from Gen Xers to millennials, and maternal mortality rates have risen drastically, the report showed. The disparities in health and well-being are even greater for women of color, the data indicated. Black maternal mortality is more than twice the U.S. national average, and Black and Hispanic students were less likely to receive subsidies for college than their white peers of similar economic status, according to the report. So they're blaming policies, and they're saying that while it's difficult to point out one reason why millennial women are experiencing declines in well-being, it isn't surprising considering the social and political structure at play. So they're going on to say that everything from the laws of Roe v. Wade to changes in Roe v. Wade to women not having proper access to the mental health system, strains on mental health, to women not having proper opportunities in the employment market, even though women are working more than men now. Women have made strides. Women earn the vast majority of all college degrees. There are so many social welfare nets for safety nets for women. I mean, guys, they basically have everything, and it's unbelievable. But they are doing worse than all the previous generations, and of course, they are not going to ever admit the reason why this is happening is because men are no longer getting married, women and men are no longer having children. There's no family unit. Women no longer have that backing. They no longer have that. For the center of a Filipina's life is her family. This is the difference between modern society and West and societies overseas, Western society and societies overseas. The center for a Filipina and for a lot of foreign women is the family, is her family, and she understands that her survival, her ability to survive, is based around her family unit. Without them, she cannot survive. Just to be very clear, guys, we can look at Japan right now, and Japan is just going absolutely wild. Japan is doing some crazy things that I never actually imagined. I did not think that this could happen in Japan, but the Japanese, the Japanese have basically decided that they're going to, the Japanese men are not having relationships, they're not having children, they're not getting married. They're basically just focusing on themselves, their own happiness, their own well being. And it's not going well for Japanese women. Japanese women are actually falling into increased states of just destitution. We can look at this article right over here, and it says in Japan, poverty and ill treatment are driving more young women into becoming evening delights, as Mayumi likes to call them. Non-profit organizations are trying to help these women, many of whom are teenagers. Authorities are showing little support for them. So in Japan, they are not bailing them out. And these women are mostly teenagers, barely 18, and they're being tricked and trapped into paying off large debts. They are working with uncles. So Kimoi Oji Sad, it basically really means uncles, and those are their clients who pay between 5,000 and 20,000 yen. That works out to roughly 34 United States. That works out to roughly 34 United States dollars, or 130 to 139 United States dollars. So the most that these men are paying is about around 139 United States dollars, but they're paying these 18-year-old women as little as 34 United States dollars for a good time, for 1 hour at that. So it's actually pretty unbelievable. And they're doing this at nearby love hotels. And this is happening after 10 p.m. Some of the girls head over to the theme bars dressed as nurses, Lolita, or superettes. And these girls usually live in cyber cafes in the heart of Kubu Kicho. And they spend around $46 yen. So about $32 a night, $32 a night for a single cabin. So they're basically living in these small rooms where there's a computer, and this is how they live. They keep all of their possessions in a backpack, and it's a hard way of living, but it's a choice that these women have made. And this is the result. This is the ultimate result of feminism, because you have what they call the hikikomori in Japan. I actually watched an anime many years ago about. It was called Welcome to the NHK for the anime fans that follow anime. Welcome to the NHK was pretty awesome. I really loved that series. I really, really enjoyed it. But Welcome to the NHK, it really highlighted some of the problems and struggles that people go through. In Japan, you have a term called NEET. I don't know if it's only for Japan, but it is used in Japan. It stands for not in education, employment, or training. There's a lot of NEETs living in Japan. A lot of NEETs are hikikomoris. Hikikomoris are socially withdrawn people who choose not to interact with anyone. They basically spend all their time locked in their rooms, engaged in cyberspace. I'm telling you, once the metaverse hits, it's going to be insane. I there's going to be a term that's going to be going around. Basically, meta heads are they're going to drop the A, so it'll be met, and then it'll be the word heads, and it's kind of like it'll basically be people who are locked into these realities, and they've become so locked into the realities that they have a hard time discerning reality from cyberspace because that's where their mind is most of the time. I do think Gen Beta, the gen that comes after Gen Alpha, will potentially be that generation, the first generation that ends up living essentially entirely in the multiverse, in the metaverse, and basically kicking off the Matrix. Where people end up trapped in the Matrix and become enslaved to AI. Yeah, I think Gen Beta, they're going to be that generation, but I'm not so worried about that. Hopefully, I won't be around for that. Hopefully, you won't be around for that. But this is the reality of things. So a lot of these young women are falling into poverty. It's not only happening in Japan, it's happening in South Korea, it's happening in China, it's happening in most advanced westernized countries. And it's because of a collapse of the family unit. There are these men and women advocating for single motherhood in these countries because the populations in these countries have declined so rapidly. While the United States is propping up the population using immigration, in other countries like Japan, South Korea, and even China, where they control their population differently and they just let anyone walk into the country, they're seeing rapid, steady declines. South Korea has the lowest birth rates in the world. It's absolutely terrible. And there are people saying that, well, we need more single motherhood in South Korea because that would then take care of the population issue. So basically, encourage women to have children outside of the family, and the government needs to subsidize that. So basically, when they say the government, they mean men. Men need to subsidize single mothers because men no longer want to go and get into a relationship and have a family. Keep in mind, in South Korean culture, it's all about the family unit. So families, parents expect their sons, their daughters to go and get married, to have a family, to have children. They're not so big on their children having children with foreigners, although it is changing with the older generations. But the family unit is very, very important. It's highly expected of their children, although they have the lowest birth rates in the world, and it's uh, having serious economic issues. It's intriguing because when you look at Western society, the people that are creating a lot of havoc and chaos and problems within our society, it's as if they didn't plan ahead to realize that if the population declines too much and too rapidly, something that Jeff Bezos is now talking about and saying that the decline of our population is extremely serious, extremely bad. It's creating problems, guys. It is absolutely creating problems, and it's more so than that. It's more so than people realize. AI can only make up for a handful of things. AI at the moment cannot entirely replace the trucking industry. Maybe one day it will, but it's probably going to it could take 10 to 20 years. And that's with a lot of things having to change. That's with driverless cars, like fully autonomous vehicles, something that may never actually happen or not in our lifetime or towards the end of our lifetime. Fully autonomous vehicles hitting the roads. I personally think it's possible, and I would love to see it. But even then, it's a major hardship because it'd have to be a large shift. There's air traffic controllers. There's so many different jobs that you cannot replace AI with. You need a physical person to actually make these decisions, and you need people that can make discernments. Everything cannot be done by a computer. These things do not have emotion. They do not have a soul. So it's going to be a very hard one there. And as many young people are choosing no longer to work, I've said this already and I'll say it again. Many Gen Alphas, the generation that comes after Gen Z, these guys are around 13 years old now. Many of them will never enter the workforce. I've said it already. Many of them will never enter the workforce. They will never work a normal 9 to 5 job in their entire lives. At best, they'll do some gig economy work like Uber Eats or DoorDash. That's going to become the absolute norm for a lot of these people. Although a lot of the wages are falling because so many people are now entering into these fields and trying to turn Uber Eats and DoorDash into a gig economy work, into full-time jobs, that it's going to create insulation in these it's going to create a massive insulation of people. So you'll end up having more people than you actually need, which is going to further drive wages down. And and of course, the irony is that people are going to keep doing these jobs. They're absolutely going to keep doing these jobs, but they're going to be demanding more pay for doing these jobs. So they're going to say they want 25, $30 an hour to deliver for these packages and so forth. I mean, that's what's happening in New York already. In New York, these people are making $30 an hour, or I think it's exactly like $29.93 an hour for 1 full hour of work. So, theoretically speaking, these guys will make $60,000 a year minimum on applications like DoorDash and Uber Eats. For Instacart, it's even worse. They're getting they're getting that $60,000, but on top of that $60,000, they're still collecting tips now. So, for example, on DoorDash and Uber Eats, they put the tipping at the end. So now you can't tip until after you've made your order and you've accepted your order. Then you can tip for good service, which is the way it's supposed to be, but you have to pay more upfront now. On the other hand, on Instacart, you have to pay more for your groceries. So they're getting that $30 an hour, I guess. But on top of that, they're also setting their tips. So you have to pay. So there's a lot of competition there. So you're paying more for your groceries and for delivery of your groceries. So these guys will now be making easily $70,000, 60 minimum of 60, but anywhere from 70 to $80,000 a year delivering groceries. But as more people go in, move into this market, it's going to become harder. The point that I'm trying to make regarding all of this is that women are left homeless and lonely as men abandon all women. Either they are reporting heightened increased rates of loneliness, sadness, despair, and it's not going to change anytime soon. It's only going to accelerate because women cannot go backwards; they can only go forwards. And when it comes to regulating emotions, that's something I'm going to talk about in another video. Women are absolutely struggling with that because you learn how to regulate your emotions from your father, not from your mother. And because so many women grow up with very weak men in their lives, or no men at all, no fathers, you know, that is one of the big reasons why women are now struggling and suffering so much in Western society. We'll talk about that more in another video. What do you guys think regarding everything we discussed here today? Let's talk more about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.